Okay, so this video is in search of a more balanced politics or political scheme. I'm wearing my yellow hat today, and it might not be a perfectly fitting hat, but I think it is about right. So I'm going to approach this a little differently than most people. First, I'd like to say this, that there's a theory or theoretical model called spiral dynamics, and one of the nice things about it is that it presents the idea that there are different ways of looking at the world, and that with techno-industrial moves, we start to orient the world differently in our minds, and that in many respects it's requisite to deal with the complexification of the techno-industrial domains around us. So it also has this inclusive notion that earlier ways of looking at the world aren't right. There's babies in bathwaters that need to be preserved, and instead of this exclusionary idea of tossing those babies out, we should keep them because they're so cherished and necessary to have a healthy world. And that's kind of going to be part of the heart of this idea that I'm going to be exploring here. There's one of the developmental waves in it is called the coral wave, and it's just emerging. And my contention is, in many respects, that this system is going to have a lot to do with power, geopolitics, reverse engineering the brain-mind. And my contention is that all these projects are well underway already, further along than most people would anticipate. And the particular focus of today's situation is politics and power, and that this more inclusionary approach, I think, tries to juggle some of the best components of the left and the right, like extremes like communism on the left has caused as much devastation as things like fascism on the right, and you could even make arguments that that's not totally right, but I think generally speaking it's authoritarian in that sense, fairly right. So we're not so much looking at an identity politics here. Rather, the attention is to find the babies in the bathwater of both the left and the right, and show how, in my opinion, this gets us closer to a balanced way forward in the geopolitical landscape. I'll lay out just a basic idea system, a schema of ideas that could be the foundation or a foundation for one potential way forward in the coral waters. So here we find our coral waters, and they can be rough, I think. There might be some chaos in these waters if we do, in fact, transition at a geopolitical scale, because this is whole system transition. This isn't just some localized system. When you're talking about the fundamental systems of government, you're talking about the broadest of scale of transition. So it's going to affect and have consequences right down the line in some regards. So I'm personally, and this is not, I don't think everybody in the coral landscape necessarily follows something like this, but I'm more of a panarchist. And that might sound scary, and I'm not going to explain it so much right now, maybe circle back to it, but I'll get to some particulars of an example of how this system might look. So automation is a big thing that we're going to see in the future. And I don't think you can talk about the future political, economic landscape very well if you don't talk about automation. And to me, a lot of traditional jobs will be automated. How much that means that new jobs will be created? The one analogy that I think I should point to there is that, you can look at how in the Industrial Revolution, the muscles of things like horses were mechanized. And so, the landscape of the future of horses' work looked like it was going to be, steady growth, and there would be more and more horses put into use in the future. But with industrialization, the mechanization of muscles, the horse use almost went off to zero. The few horses that still were put into use are more hobby-based horses. So there's an argument to be made in a similar sense about humans' minds. With automation, it looks like, oh, people are going to need more and more people to think up new machines and automated systems and these sorts of things. But really what we're doing is we're mechanizing the mind in some ways. Not totally, I don't think, but in part. And so, our usefulness in the workforce might be like horses and drop to near zero and just have hobby work. So one way to approach this, to put a safeguard around the chaos that could result from mass unemployment, is to tax robots. So if you tax robots, what that does is, in essence, it allows, so there's a few steps to it. You can't just tax the robots. You can use something like cryptocurrency, which I think cryptos are a fairly coral to yellow to coral sort of system, depending on who's working on the system. The yellow innovators are in part, big part of the crypto landscape. But I think there are a few coral strangeopangeos swimming around in those waters too. And so, what you do is you can have these decentralized ledgers that distribute. This is a robot here, and it distributes micro transactions every day to individuals around the city from all the robots. And then I don't know what that would add up to. As automation grows, it means you're going to collect more and more money, and this helps to safeguard us from a centralized government that might take a big cut of that percentage of the robots. If it's distributed through a ledger, through cryptocurrency, it can be distributed directly to individuals' pockets without having to go through a middleman. And there's going to be some things of regulation and that sort of thing around it, which does get us back into government-ish territory, but there's probably ways around that. I just haven't fully thought about that yet. So that's one component. Another thing that's a big deal, and this is central nexus to the old system, is this top-down system of government where you get streams of influence from the top. You vote somebody in every 4 years, potentially, open question to some degree, even about that, and then they make all the decisions for you, or a group of selected individuals do. The idea here is that you almost can eliminate that and almost have strictly bottom-up influence with maybe a little bit of top-down. And I'm not totally against some top-down stuff. I'll present it in a different way maybe, but the bottom-up influence could be something like decentralized referendums. So again, using something like cryptocurrency or some other decentralized ledger or something like this, we can have near free, near ubiquitous referendums on almost any topic. So here in my town, do we want to build a new road through Main Street? It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Do we want to spend that as a collective group on that road? Through these decentralized systems, you can vote for free on almost any topic. There's still question marks about, abilities, right? So some technical person maybe should get more say, and you can arrange for that. You could do autodidactic tests on the internet or on the platform that show certain amounts of skill in certain areas. Potentially, if somebody's willing to do those tests, it might be tricky. There's things that would be challenging about that, but that might give them an extra vote or two on a particular topic, and so it could be a little bit weighted to your technical expertise on particular topics potentially. But the nice thing is this is almost exclusively bottom up and far less top down, which is, I think, going forward, a very, very central thing to have this swarm intelligence of individuals. So panarchies and also allow for this idea of very localized government systems potentially, and you could have you could choose what kind of nation state you want to live in with a lot more freedom than our present system, and so that you get a lot more choice over the kind of particular government that you want. And there can be a multitude of different kinds of governments to live in. You could have a libertarian government, or anarchic, or a minarchist, or republic, or democracy traditional, or socialist system. See, what this allows you to do is choose whichever government you want to be part of, or lack thereof in some sense, depending on the context that you find yourself in. And there might be certain kinds of superordinate rules, very basic, that govern our planetary federation, just to kind of keep things a little bit kosher. But on the whole, you can allow for a lot more distributed kind of ways of being in the world if people choose or want that to be the case. Now, that does create certain kinds of tension and struggle, and it's not going to be perfect, but it allows a lot more independence and freedom in simultaneity to a kind of deep agapic force, which means that you're embracing the different kinds of potentials and saying all of these are valid. Some might be more right or better than others, but you're saying that at least there's a partial truth and people can choose what kind of truth they want to live into. As a being, their sovereignty allows for that. And so instead of subordinating you due to the fact that you're born into a particular country to follow a very regimented, strictly, and very difficult to transition to a different nation state, you have a lot more mobility. But you still have to abide by those laws if there are certain kinds of laws in that nation state. It's your duty or obligation to be a member of that society in the context of that society, that sort of thing. So I think that's all I'm going to say on this topic. It's kind of short, I guess, but hopefully that's helpful.